So this is the first section of the module. So I'm going to be going through a few slides from our PowerPoint for each section of the module. I don't want you to get overwhelmed, so we'll be going through this step by step. So I'm going to take off the video and kind of go through today. And so let's go into presentation size. All right, so the first thing is that this is looking at post-secondary transition and how to empower students of all ages in transition. Here's two examples from some of these projects that you're going to be working on from some of my past students. And so this was a girl who did her transition and she liked the anime, so she put to infinity and beyond, and also the Toy Story idea. So, and then I like this quote too. I like to go to my teachers to help me. I like to talk to Miss Jenny about my anger problems. So these are the types of things that you're going to be trying to pull together from your students so that they can really think about what they're doing in order to be more successful in life. So there we go. So the agenda for today is to, there we go, to first of all do some reading. So I have already asked you week 1 to read The Trainer Chapter 1, and week 3 I asked you to do Chapter 2. For this week and for this module, I'm actually asking you to read Chapter 4. And then you'll be using that to inform you as you work on your project and also to answer some questions to get credit for the module. We're going to be looking at two websites. One is the what's called the NTAC, the National Technical Assistance Center on Transition Toolkit, or Transition website, and then we're going to look at the toolkit resources. And then we're also going to look at the Zaro Center, and that has a lot of great free tools and resources for teachers. Here's another one of the slides from someone's PowerPoint. You can see the resources, and she lists her family, her friends, the after-school program, Girls on the Run, the education specialist, a teacher, and also Princess. So that's just a nice little slide. So we're going to start out today talking about transition as a cultural practice, and that's the work of Trainer. And then we'll look at the online supports, and then we'll actually look at the assignment that you'll be doing with this. It actually isn't due until the 19th of March, but getting started on it right away is important. I'm asking you to read the Kalyampur Chapter 3 by the 26th, and then also have this module completed, all the sections of this, by the 26th. So just to kind of bring you up to speed, we've talked in class about the NLTS2 data on students with disabilities and their post-secondary transition. We have established that they have less post-secondary success than their peers with disabilities. We talked about some of the negative outcomes. That was from Chapter 1, and we had the presentation in class on the NLTS data, and then some of you guys even wrote about it in your critical reflection. We talked about that in addition to having a disability, that a lot of times students with culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds have even more negative experiences. So it really speaks to the importance of, all of these students who we're working with really getting additional support, but even ensuring that it's culturally responsive when you're working with kids from diverse backgrounds. We talked about the need for this as far as the Individuals with Disabilities Improvement Act, that it requires transition planning at age 16. For all students with IEPs, but we know that best practices starting much, much earlier in the elementary ages as well. The other thing that we have hit on, and that your book talks about, and that I know I've talked about, and we had Dr. Chambliss last week mention, is the Summary of Performance, which is a transition document that's mandated by IDEA, that all students who are leaving special ed, whether they're leaving to, drop services and just go to a 504 plan, or they're leaving because they're dropping out, or leaving school for another reason, or possibly because they have either aged out or graduated with a diploma. there is a requirement that they have the summary of performance, and that basically goes through the assessments that were used to help them think about and make decisions and goals for their transition. It also talks about the expectations as far as what their goals are for employment, for post-secondary education or vocational training, and then also independent living. Then the other thing that it does is it connects the child with the different resources and people who they need to talk to once they leave school. So for example, if you've put in a referral for the Department of Rehabilitation, then on the summary of performance there is a place to list the phone number for the Department of Rehabilitation and who the contact person is, along with their phone number and email. So all of those pieces are there and part of this mandated paperwork, but sometimes districts have different levels of how they're actually implementing this mandate. So what I'm doing is trying to help you prepare your students and get all that information together in a student-led way. We've got some more evidence as far as the research goes that that promising transition practices and resources aren't being provided to the teachers or the students in the district. And so we want to make sure to combat that. And then also that the culturally and linguistically diverse families experience barriers when working with the schools around this. So we have the Student Self-Determination PowerPoint template, which has 3 versions that you're going to be completing by the end of this module. And like I said, it addresses the ITP and the SOP. It's culturally responsive, and it allows for collaboration between the different stakeholders. And it can be used as a template that can be altered by the teacher, the student, and the family to meet the unique needs of each child. And I would just put in there that all students are invested in their lives, their quality of life, their learning and their success as adults. And so it's our job to kind of bring all of those pieces together. And so here's an example of another one of the slides from one of my past students' template or PowerPoint that she put together, or that her student put together. And she wrote that the accommodations that the student wrote was, I'm a visual learner, and need a schedule to be written down at all times. I need verbal reminders as well to answer some questions that I don't know. I need more time for activities to complete it, and for modifications, I need some of the words written out for me to trace. Another modification I need to be successful is the directions to be read out loud. So you can see that there's some grammatical issues. It is a student, and this is a working document that we'll be working on. Okay, so the trainer, chapters 1, 2, and 4. In chapter 1, we talked about the historically marginalized groups. We talked about the post-school disparities and the historical context of transition. How Madeline Will, who is part of the Office of Special Education, really was at the forefront of bringing in post-secondary education requirements in the 80s, when she wrote about bridging school to adulthood, a paper on bridging those two. And then we started, chapter 2 really looked at how we went from just having vocational and employment as the big transition supports that we did in schools, to also looking at community adjustment. And then in the 90s, we started looking at the college and career to the quality of life, and how because of the NLTS data and the NLTS2 data, we started seeing that all of the different intersectionality of the data. So, somebody who had, for example, emotional disturbance as their disability and were African American, had even poorer post-secondary outcomes as far as job and post-secondary education and independence than, for example, a student who is white and had a learning disability. And so we were able to start looking at that data. We also started looking at the importance of environment in the school context. Were students be learning how to get employment schools by, maybe collecting all the recycling at the school campus, And then, how does that type of experience actually generalize to having a job as an adult? I am a huge proponent of workability, but I've often seen a lot of workability placements be more focused on, maybe filing papers in the school office, and then, not really working with them, getting out into the field and learning how to use those skills so that they can get a job that they enjoy working at within the community that they live. Working at the school with workability only worked for, the 3 months or the 6 months that they had hours for. It didn't necessarily get them a job once they graduated. Also looking at the social capital and the networking, it talks about self-awareness. How do you learn about your strengths and your areas of need? And, like we saw on the slide, what things help you. And so learning those self-advocacy skills. That also, the post-secondary transition was really outcome oriented in the 90s. And that, are these student goals or are these adult goals that and outcomes that we're looking at? And so that's another thing to look at. It also talks about the taxonomy for transition education and the 5 domains. I'll give you a hint. It's on page 53. And then, of course, the 32 evidence-based practices that are out there as well. In chapter 4, it's really focused on self-determination and healthcare. So the optimal, what is it to be an optimal adolescent experience? How do disabilities, health, and transition kind of intersect? Health as a domain in transition education. And then I really love the section on the self-determination as disposition and developing self-determination and agency for healthy, equitable outcomes for all students. So your big question for this section of the module is, how can you use the trainer text to guide your approach to transition? So I will have you answer that question to the best of your ability and really pull from the chapter to give evidence for your answer. All right, thank you and good luck.